Joining Sue and Paul for our panel discussion, interactive panel discussion, is John Parsons from BEAMA and Richard Gardner from the ARMC, and they obviously need to be introduced as well to our audience this afternoon. So John has 40 years experience in the energy industry and is Director Digital of BEAMA, the British Electrotechnical and Allied Manufacturers Association. He took on that post in 2019 following many roles within BEAMA since 2003. And he's currently chair of the BSI L13 Smart Energy Systems Coordination Group. John leads on building information management and cybersecurity at BEAMA and has oversight of the flexible energy systems and networks portfolio. Part of his role involves understanding the impact of digitisation on BEAMA members and how they should respond to this. BEAMA are also patrons and affiliates of the UK BIM Alliance. So welcome to John, nice to have you on board. And secondly, Richard Gardner is a chartered mechanical engineer who has an MSc in rail systems engineering at the University of Sheffield before working in rail consultancy for SNC Lavalin in various places from Derby through to Auckland in New Zealand. He has broad experience of the rail systems with specific expertise in rolling stock enhancement and turnkey modifications. Richard always had a passion for innovation, and in 2018 he joined Sheffield University's Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. He was astonished at the capability and directly applicable knowledge that could be readily applied across the construction industry, and in 2019 he became the sector lead for rail. So that is our panel. So hopefully you can all see the first active poll that we have for our afternoon's conversation. And you've all signed up at TBIM. Yep, we've got somebody already starting to vote, so that's good. So please place your votes. In this one, you can pick only one to best describe where you see your role, which will help us to understand as the panelist and myself as chairing the session, where the skills and expertise within our group are. Hopefully we'll get a few more votes. We'll let it run for a little while and see where we go.
So we're waiting for the professional services to catch up with the manufacturers.
You can't lead the audience. Definitely not allowed to do that. Okay. We seem to have ground to a reasonable halt, so I will lock the voting. Oh, and there we are. Fantastic. Right, so that gives us a feel for our audience this afternoon, and that allows us for everybody to have a bit of a practice with our first question, or the test question. Right, so first up now is John. So I don't know if you want to add to your question or just let people start voting.
I'll quickly introduce it. I suppose it's a bit of a parochial one in a way for trade associations, especially product manufacturer associations, but I'd love to know what our members and others think we should be doing. So just how active do they want their professional bodies to be? Do we just give them a bit of guidance? Do we actually start developing PDT, product data templates for them? Do we just connect them to stuff? Do we encourage member companies to sort of develop product information models? Or do we sort of take real initiatives, things like getting involved in the CPI that we mentioned earlier? There's an awful lot of data needed for that. Should we be working with industry to put that in place for them? Or should we stay out of it and just do nothing? My vote's on that one, by the way. That would make my life so much easier. But
I'm just pleased that people started voting. There was a horrible pause when nobody was making any votes on it. But I guess they were waiting for you to give your commentary on it. And remember, for the rest of the panel, you need to have some thoughts on this as well. It isn't just John that's now got to defend his question. Okay, got a few more votes. That seems to be doing quite well. So I am thinking that now is the moment to close that poll. So what do you think to that, John, to start with, and then I'll bring in everybody else's thoughts and views.
Not at all surprised. I'll be honest, one of the things that surprises me most, given I'm responsible for sort of BEAMA digital stuff and so on, is why my phone isn't ringing all the time. Because my best understanding of the situation is that there's a real shortage of product data out there for BIM use. And I just sort of think people should be phoning me all the time, asking, demanding why it's not there and what we're doing about it, which we are doing stuff. We are developing PDTs, I should say. What's happening? The more I talk to people, the more impression I get is that people are sitting at computers typing in data out of PDFs and so on, and the world's managing without all this wonderful data stuff. But it's not what we should be doing. So I'm not surprised people want the PDTs and the PDSs that come from
Anecdotally, I would agree with that. I would say that an enormous amount of time is spent by designers looking for information and trusting the information, and then extracting it from analog forms. And I would say a PDF is to some extent an analog form.
Just while you're on then as well, Sue, you mentioned the CCPI, the Code for Construction Project Information, in your presentation. How do you what do you make of that being the second highest vote in this poll here?
Yeah, it's interesting. If all the trade associations developed their own code of conduct, then yeah, that would be an awful lot of badges. You might have to have more than one. Yeah, I generally think that, well, there are two things. One is that trade associations have a wide range of resources. Some are really, really small and others are much bigger and can do a lot more. My focus would be to, because trade associations are sort of acting for their members, and that's what they're trying to do, and being the voice of their members, to try and help them, particularly SMEs, avoid the pitfalls by being informed about the primary issues, and depending on the scale and size of the SMEs and of the manufacturers, and their interests and the type of market that they're in, because they do vary quite a lot. It's then a question of the manufacturers deciding whether they individually, based on their own market, whether they get involved and what they get involved in. But the good thing about a trade association is it should be impartial, so it should be able to provide impartial advice to manufacturers. That's what I'd focus on.
Next up then, and Paul, if I bring you in, what your thoughts are on some of those points there, perhaps?
Yeah, I've just made a comment that there are some good trade associations and there are some bad ones. So some obviously do care more about riding on the digital wave, and some, like John mentioned, BEAMA, really work hard with their members to ensure that they can navigate through this kind of jungle of the different tools and understand, make informative decisions. So I mean, that's the way I see it. It's important. Trade associations do care, obviously, about their members and explain them how the analog works in the digital, and what they should do about it and shouldn't do about it, and where they should go if they need help. I think that should be as simple as that.
Very good. And Richard, we've brought you along for your expertise in the rail sector and manufacturing to see whether we can learn stuff from your good selves. From what you've heard this afternoon, any thoughts or particular on this first poll?
I think there are great parallels and great echoes with some of the challenges that the people we're talking to and the people and some of the issues that are being brought forth here. It's yeah, quite refreshing. Well, not refreshing, I'm not sure that's quite the right word, but yeah, it's quite interesting to see that the same challenges, the same struggles are being dealt with across industries. I think a key theme that seems to come out perhaps more, I'm not sure if it's, I must confess, slight imposter syndrome here.
Absolutely not.
One of the key challenges just regarding that sort of that exchange of information. So.
No, I think it's all useful to know. I mean, I don't think we can just think we have all the answers. There will be other industries, other sectors that may have been through this pain before, or are going through similar issues, that we all need to start to learn from each other. And I think, well, as Paul was saying, with that European digital strategy, a whole strategy for Europe, well, that's going to have to cascade down, and it needs to talk to each other across sectors. So we need to be doing that. I think final bit to put John back on the spot, provide guidance to members on BIM. How do you react to that one? Are we still trying to tell people what it is, or do you think it's more nuanced than that?
I think it's still needed, to be honest.
Okay.
In the broader context, I think it's helping people understand what they should be doing, because there's so many options on what you could do. Yes,
I think you're very, very true there. And BIM for BEAMA members would look very different to another trade association or another professional body, or specifically on a project perhaps as well. So yeah, no, it's interesting stuff. Brilliant. Okay. Right. So let's see if we can do our next poll then, which is Richard's question. If you want to bring some context to this one then, Richard.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Duncan. So I've just put a little bit of background around it. So I got talking with Duncan a little while ago after he became aware of a project we've got going with regard to the digitisation of rail maintenance technology. So we're currently working on a project showing the potential to our members, visitors, public at large, really, show the potential of digitising. For example, our use case is a legacy work document around a rail maintenance activity. And we wanted to show how the correct use of data can be managed and deployed. And as Sue rightly pointed out, the first thing we needed for this was a data structure. And so we adopted the S1000D specification. So it's this, I'm not sure if you'll be aware of it, but it's a specification used extensively in aerospace and marine, managing technical pubs around complex assets. And it's freely available, and it's put together by European and US aviation industries. And this technology, this project will show that how adopting this framework, you can then start to realize the benefits that unlocked through this standardization. So, for example, the workflow we're talking through, use of this information, or this management in this context, in this hierarchical structure, you can then, for very little additional work, deploy to PDF, put to AR, unlock the use of QR codes, and also unlock additional KPIs and improve the visibility of your processes to future improvement. So the real priority is making digitization or digitalization more accessible to industry. That was some of the real feedback that we were getting back, that we wanted to see use cases. We wanted to know, it's all well and good, but how can it make a difference to me in my business? So I have a real passion talking to different people just to understand what their priorities and their industrial priorities are. So I've got a couple of questions today, and both of them are more about understanding the attitudes and the desires of people in the room.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, I'm going to lock the voting, and that is where we sit now. Time is the biggest problem. Well, no, time and confidence jointly the highest ranking.
That is interesting. So other forums and people I've spoken to, a lot of it is this sort of the IP, the security, that keeping control of information. I fully get the time. It's complex. There's a lot of change, and just basically keeping abreast of the developments. So yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, I guess it's the VHS Betamax argument, isn't it? We have confidence of yes. Yeah, the punishment of the early adopter.
Paul, can I bring you in, because you sort of talked about standards developments, digital strategies. I'm not going to try and cover off what I know is coming later, but your thoughts on this one as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it shows you what I think I concluded in my presentation about the confidence, about understanding, which platform or what to use, which tools. Is it an information management system, how it links to your IT, and being busy doing day jobs. I think that could indicate, if you don't have that strategy, if you don't have it embedded in your organization, doing it as a part of the job, then that's usually what you end up is that we see in this as a kind of, the BIM sits somewhere else, either with marketing or someone else. And we're doing our day jobs like IT jobs, and I think that's part of the problem. And then the confidence is, I'd rather do nothing than just, place the bet on the wrong horse and then being sacked by a company I think that's genuinely the view.
I was going to come to you next, Sue, but go on. Put your point in, and then I'll ask you my question as well.
I think all of them are really interesting, aren't they? But I think the last one that's got the fewest votes, my supply chain isn't interested, is such an old argument. It doesn't really cut it anymore. I think not just because the supply chain would be interested if they could get it, but it is a very common thing that people say, I'm not doing BIM objects because my clients haven't asked for them. Well, thank God for that. But this is about internal return on investment. This is about as Richard has said, once you digitize, you get all sorts of knock-on benefits from that just fall out of the system. I mean, for example, I've got a colleague who works for a manufacturer who, when they get sample requests, the website is set up so that that someone can only ask for a single sample at a time, so that wastes their time. The sample request arrives at her desk as an email, which she's required to print out and put in a file, and then the file is taken to the factory where someone individually picks and individually packs all the samples and sends them off in the post. And this is a mixture of bad user interface on the website and absolutely ridiculous lack of digitization in a company which is incredibly innovative in other ways. And so you can get benefits from digitizing, almost immediately. As soon as you start doing it, you'll start to identify what the benefits are.
Thank you, Sue. Coming to you then finally, John, I'm going to pick on you for the ROI thread that came up there. Do you think that we've still not actually made it clear to the industry? And is that again where sort of trade associations, when we came back to looking at your previous question, talking about getting them to understand BIM, have a part to play?
I think that goes back to the last answer in a way. I think the supply chain not being interested, but I think it also goes to what Sue just said. I think that a lot of the benefits come out of it when you start doing it, but they're not immediately obvious. It's hard to put a sort of an ROI around the sort of stuff you're not quite sure what's going to happen, but it's just fundamental to me. I think it's the potential impact on the industry of doing digitalization properly is just so huge. Yeah. It's hard to believe that the ROI is not going to be sufficient. Yeah.
No, I think you have a very good point there, Ian. I can remember thinking a long time ago that BIM was actually, you were trying to demonstrate an absence of risk, and because nobody in this industry was actually being honest about the risks that they were covering, that there was no way of proving that you'd actually made a saving. Particularly, I mean, a contractor would never say, well, actually, I wasted 5 million on this job, but it could have been 10. It will be lost somewhere in the figures somewhere or other. So the benefits of BIM become very hard to demonstrate in that respect. Anyway, before we get into really contentious ground or whatever, we will try onto poll number 4, which is back to John, I believe. Yes.
Okay, so I've been involved in this area for a few years now. And PDTs, product data templates, is what I've been most focused on. But basically, to make all this work, you need lots and lots of different organisations to work together in a coordinated and harmonious way. Who should be in charge of that? Should anybody be in charge of that? There's quite a few bodies who could potentially do it. But what do people think? Where would they look to get that sort of coordination from?
Fantastic. And we'll notice in there, which is at the moment getting a strong vote of none of the above or none of the list, please add your suggestion in chat. So if you think there is a better organisation placed, please put it down and we'll add that to the conversation. But could be into interesting grounds in that it's none of the above or none of the below now, but there aren't any answers in chat as to who it should be. Well, let the votes run for a bit longer. Okay, I'm going to lock it there. Right, so in the chat we have, it should be a government lead with an agnostic approach. It's not about being in charge, it's about being connected. I'll let Paul explain himself, and I'll let Sue explain herself in a second. So, John, I'll let you go back first of all and make sense of your question.
Well, no, I'm really pleased with that answer, to be honest, because the conclusion I came to was I was on a fool's errand trying to find out who should be in charge of all this, because it's bigger than any individual organisation can control. So the only way you get it to work is through collaboration and coordination and just working together.
Very good. Okay, fantastic. Paul, you had your answer in first in the chat, and then Sue was next. So,
yeah,
Paul,
my point is it's definitely like Building Smart International Chapter, CPA. I think it's the point is even ISO 23886 really talks about domain experts. So in different countries, it should be a different setup. If we talk about the UK, it's just trade associations, but it must not be the pyramid vision of a construction product association. It needs to be almost like a horizontal type, because it is about connection and about domain expertise. So, and I think that is a key, that we don't have this pyramid where we've been kind of, because we have lots of manufacturers which sits outside of construction product association. So it's very important that it is, in my opinion, that it's done by domain experts.
Very good, thank you. And Sue, you commented in the chat. Do you want to expand upon that as well?
These things are now known as data templates, in the sense that that's what the ISO calls them. They don't call them product data templates, because it's not just about products, it's about systems, it's about objects, but really they're just subsets of data. So you've got a lot of data about your products, and then the question is, what key data will people want to compare and will people need? So there's key fire data, for example, or dimensional data that needs to be agreed what the dimensions are, and so on. Now, a lot of this is just standard industry stuff, so the trade associations would do it, and I know in Spain, I think Paul knows more about this, you know, the National Trade Association is helping it to happen. But I think that generally PDTs are a bit of a distraction from the whole digitisation imperative, really, because they if you think, well, we're doing PDTs, well, we're doing it. No, because if you don't digitize, then it doesn't matter. Okay, what every manufacturer will be looking in their systems and saying, what attributes do we need? And all the distributors will be saying to the manufacturers, these are the attributes we need for this product, and these are the attributes we need for that product. So the decisions are out there, it's just collecting them together. And the initiative to connect them together in the UK, it was known as Lexicon, which is over 6 years old now, I think. And that project aimed to do that, but I think it failed because manufacturers were being asked to provide their expertise to it for free, with no demonstrable return on investment, and maybe a suspicion about it as well, and other reasons too, perhaps. And I think, you know, what Lexicon gets turned into, and it is a brand that's being reborn at the moment, but it will be something completely different to what it was 4 years ago, as far as I can tell. It will only matter if the trade associations, including the CPA, collaborate together to get on with it on behalf of their members, but their members shouldn't be waiting around for PDTs, because it's just not going to happen if that's what happens.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Depressing, sorry.
No. It's realism, I think, and the market has possibly done a lot of hyperbole in this whole sector, and now it's got to that realism stage. And actually, this is quite a lot harder than we thought it was going to be. And we've got to play fair, and this is all quite difficult. Richard, I've no idea whether you're having a very steep learning curve in what a product data template is, or whether there is something equivalent in the rail sector. You've got it all fixed, or how you sort of.
I concur. No, I think again, it is just echoes back. I think I don't think we have the answers to all this. Certainly coming from rail, I think the answers need to come from this agnostic body that would steer and guide the relevant stakeholders. I think it's also a question of it's almost incentivizing the adoption or the incremental adoption, how you can sort of ease that transition and do that in a clear way.
Do you think it is easier or harder, from my perceived view, that rail procurement or manufacturing, and therefore manufacturers, is far more international than perhaps construction market, or am I just misunderstanding it?
Well, yeah, you're not governed just by a UK body, but international suppliers. I think you're working to the relevant standards of the relevant industry. It's a harder sell. I think it's maybe harder to get the traction, no pun intended. But I'm not sure what the answer is, to be honest.
Not to worry.
I think it's it's a difficult one, and it's something that you need the whole industry to work together to do. And like you're dealing with the complex situation where you're having sort of state-owned operation, you're having private investment, manufacturing. So it is a complex procurement environment. And I don't think we have all the answers. We certainly don't have all the answers yet from the people that I talk to, and the freedom and availability of information, certainly at a mobile asset level. The transparency of the information you're getting coming down from manufacturers to operators and users is sparse.
Okay, well, I wasn't expecting you necessarily to have all the instant answers for us, but it's just useful to know where we sit. And it leads us now to your second question, Richard, actually, if you want to expand a little about this one then.
Yeah, a little bit more on, I think, what I was just saying, trying to understand from the people in the room where we think the barriers are, how we can sort of incentivize transition or adoption and digitisation, where we think we're seeing. Part of it's a technical, part of it is maybe, addressing that confidence issue. It would be just interesting to see what people's thoughts would be on, how we can start to progress down this road.
Okay, the voting has started. There's lots of great comments going on in the chat as well. What we'll do is we'll capture all of that and kind of turn it into as I said already, a bit of a blog or whatever to sort of go along with the slides, which again, we are recording the event and we'll post the individual presentations. We'll cut up the whole event so you haven't got to go through 2 hours to see each of the presentations, which will be on the Leeds Beckett University YouTube channel in due course, once we've done our editing to them. Okay, we look to be getting towards the end of our voting. So I shall lock the votes. Okay.
I think, as expected, following on from the previous one where there was a clear priorities under confidence, isn't it? It's that industry-like certainty, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, no, that does sound useful. I'm very conscious as well. Sorry, go on, Richard.
ARMC as well. We do get a lot of the just looking at the incremental approach. You know, how can we test the water? How can we start to see some of the ROI for the investment? So yeah, that's good to see it.
Yeah.
Third place, but
yeah,
clear winners there.
Good. No, that's good to see, as you say. I was going to pick on that one and pass that over to John, and sort of your views of sort of how are you hoping to try and suggest to BEAMA members how they might dip their toe rather than that jump in the deep end and hope?
I'm not sure dipping toes work, to be honest. I think you have to do it.
Right, okay.
But I would say I agree with the answer, the top one there. And so, because I mean, we're working with CIBSE, providing PDTs or DTs, but we can't provide all the ones that CIBSE need. You know, there's products way beyond the ones that BEAMA members provide that have to be included in what CIBSE members want. So we can only do it in collaboration with other trade associations, other organisations covering other product areas. But if we don't do it in the same way and have that consensus, it just won't work properly.
Interesting. Yeah, no, very, very interesting point, as you say. Yeah, I can understand that if there was a way to do a bit of BIM, it would be good, but actually you do have to do quite a lot to actually possibly, coming back to the previous question, going back to get that ROI to genuinely see it or whatever. What are your thoughts, Sue, on this one then, particularly?
Well, I'm quite glad about number 2, because that's what we're trying to do. So that's really good, and I agree that there needs to be collaboration. The problem is, you know, that in the industry as a whole, collaboration is a bit of a dirty word, and we've all been talking about it forever. One of the reasons that, you know, more BIM adoption hasn't happened, and for example we have lots of little BIMs, is partly because we don't collaborate on one big one for projects. So, you know, it's always going to be a problem, and I think from that, what we actually need is leadership here, we need the key senior people in the industry to help get the message across in a way that can be understood. So I would encourage the leadership of all the bodies to get behind the initiatives that are actually going to provide an understandable roadmap and an incremental approach, so that individual manufacturers and small trade associations and big ones can actually play their part and want to.
Okay, and Paul, your thoughts at the end of this one? I'm conscious of what your question is, so I'm trying to not steer in a direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, my comment is I think the clear and understandable roadmap, I think that is really, we have to stick now to the framework what we have and be very clear to manufacturers, because we had BIM level 2, then we had we now have the digital twin hub, we have all sorts of initiatives. We had lexicon, now we have the construction product information code for construction product information. We have BRE templates, NBS, BIM store. You have loads of, and it's difficult. I mean, if you are an SME, you know, you probably have you can place the bet only once, and if that fails, then you know, I'm not gonna. If I'm an SME manufacturer, and there is another initiative, digital object identifiers, digital logbooks. Yeah, it's difficult. Where you go if there's not a clear roadmap, understandable in a plain language.
Yeah, I mean, we're already in a situation where the number of identifiers is so huge. I mean, you know, everyone knows about CE marking. Now we've got UKCA marking. So if you've got a product you want to sell in Europe and in the UK, you have to have 2 marks on it, you know, already. And that's, you know, that's working against this collaborative approach and making it more and more difficult for SMEs to actually make the right decision.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Richard. You obviously found a good question for our audience there. Right, we'll move on to Sue, your question.
Oh, it's my birthday. Okay.
Happy birthday, Sue. Here's your question.
Okay, this question is inspired by one that was often used by a chap called David Meerman Scott, who wrote a book called The New Rules of Marketing and PR. And I've just thinking about, I don't know when it was written, but probably about 2006, 2007. It's slightly adapted from that because, of course, the world has moved on a little bit, and I'm particularly asking about manufactured products. If you're a designer or a contractor, where you get your information from, rather than consumer products, which is what he was talking about.
Yeah. Could go any way, this, I think, this poll still. I think we've just about reached a consensus on that one. So there we are.
Yes.
Are you surprised?
No. Yeah, and it's interesting in a lot of different ways. The question is, which of these is guaranteed to be accurate? And yeah, which is a good question. I mean, I would say manufacturer's website, I work with manufacturers, and I would say the information on their website isn't always accurate. It certainly isn't always up to date. It definitely isn't always comprehensive. And so some of it is still analog. In terms of accuracy, I think the technical helpline is your, or backed up by email, is probably your easiest and best source of accurate data, but only if the person that you talk to is in possession of accurate data, which is why specifiers often have relationships with people that they trust, and they stick with products that they trust, because they simply don't have time to verify the audacity, the credibility of new products. So it's only in a crisis they will switch to a different product. So the question is then, how can we help manufacturers provide structured, accurate, reliable, verifiable information on their websites?
No, it's an interesting one. I think also looking at Paul's comments in the chat, so I'm going to bring Paul in next to sort of your comments about manufacturers' websites as well.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me now, but again, what is the role of the website going forward? We had that question Chris Whitty asked on our call last week, and again there is that question in what is the role? If it's about the data, interconnected data dictionaries or databases, or genuinely the kind of hybrid cloud and multi-cloud environment, then possibly maybe websites will no longer be used by manufacturers in 5 years. We don't know.
No, it is an interesting point that even if we just sort of look back 10 years at the technology we're using and how much it's changed, do we know what it will look like in 10 years time looking forwards, let alone 50, 60, 100 years for an asset or whatever. John, any thoughts and comments on this one then?
Yeah, I mean, just seems to show basically this is a digital marketplace already, whatever you think about it, and we're not running it as well as we could be done, but it's people aren't. So I'm working on terminology at TC 442. We use the term product data sheet. I think in 10 years time there'll be a lot of young engineers who have no idea what a product data sheet used to be and why we use that wording.
Yes.
The save icon.
I don't see many drawing boards in offices these days. I mean, the whole process is digital. We just haven't sorted out sharing that data. That's the key.
No, very good points. And Richard, then finally on your thoughts on this one. Is there thoughts with the MTC then as to where you think data hosting should be going or whatever in the future?
Yeah, I think that echoes our experiences and my expectations, really, that I think suppliers, users, their first protocol is to look to the manufacturer's website. I think it's challenges we've seen as well as sometimes the manufacturers miss a trick in the depth of information that they retain on their website. Quite often it can just be the newest and the greatest. If you're looking for legacy data sheets and things like that, it can start to get more difficult. But absolutely, I think it's a digital world. It's everyone's first protocol.
Yes, it is a very interesting. Sorry, Paul, you wanted to add some more?
No, I was just going to react to Richard's comment. I don't think that's very accurate. Just again to say manufacturers don't have this historical data sheets. They do. It's the question is does the supply chain understands they have to hand over things like declaration of performances, which do include specific information and the data, and they have the obligation to do that. And does supply chain understands manufacturers have a legal obligation to store the particular data about a particular product and batch for 10 years? I mean these are the questions, and I think manufacturers have all of that. The problem is they just don't trust, and they're just being badly burned by the whole BIM object and this whole story of digitalization of last 5 years. So I think it's again, it's the collaboration has to start, and if we have a clear roadmap and clear plain language roadmap, they will join, I'm sure.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And finally, quickly, Sue, I'm conscious of a little bit of time. But...
Yeah, just that manufacturers' websites they're always going to be a sort of shop window, but they could link to structured data behind them, some of which may be hosted in other places. So, for example, fire testing certificates and reports, they should be held by the test centre, but the manufacturer should be linking back to those, so that if you want a fire test certificate or whatever for a particular product or system, then you can access that via the manufacturer's website. It's a strong marketing message that you have to go where your audience is. If your audience wants to go to your website, that's where you put the information.
Yeah.
How you get it there is up to you.
Yeah, no, it is very much that front door or portal which gets you to the right answer, but it might be sitting somewhere completely different. No, yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, and our last question for the afternoon. Apologies, Paul, you've been kept to last, but here we have your question, which we've been sort of alluding to over the course of the afternoon.
Yeah, it's really about if business do have a data strategy in place, which I think, because that is a key to kicking off any type of digital transformation, or getting technology in, as I mentioned in my presentation. So yeah.
I'm already feeling, if we had time, a supplementary suddenly live question to all the 44% that say yes of, have you read it? Or is it just that document that's stopping your desk from wobbling at home?
Bit like the sustainability report, isn't it? Sustainability strategy, which nobody ever reads. One
of the companies I used to work at, they did a survey of their staff, and one of the questions was, do you agree with the company's strategy? And there was a 99% agreement with it. The next question was, do you know what it is? And there was 40% answer to that one.
Oh dear. Right, let us lock this one off. So there we are.
It doesn't surprise me, really. I mean, it depends. It is like links to maybe the previous questions that we're busy with our day jobs, and I think because that's what we are measured on, and therefore we either don't read it or we don't participate it. And usually the data strategies are done by externals without kind of working with the wider organization. and yeah, and for some organization it's just a bit like a sustainability report, nice to have, a badge to have. Some do take it seriously, but yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's some bits in the chat as well at the moment in terms of, is it a document or is it a something, or what does it look like in a digital world now? That
it's also a culture change.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting point as well.
Yeah, and in order to implement a data strategy, you actually have to do cross company collaboration as well, because you have to find out where all the information is, and you need somebody to be responsible for it. And it's not actually a marketing issue, it's not a sales issue. It's, you know, some of these companies won't have chief technical officers, for example, you know, so there may not be anybody who's obviously the person to do this, which means you will have to employ somebody to do it if you want it to be done, and that may be one of the barriers to getting it to happen.
Equally, do you think it's something that you might have, but it's sort of masquerading as something else, or is that unlikely?
Well, actually, you see, you have data, so you have a data strategy. It's just not very sorted out.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I mean by when I said it's not a document. It's not a document, it's a procedure. You've already got the procedure.
Yeah.
You operate the procedure. The question is actually, have you looked at what you do with your data and worked out how you could do that better? And are you implementing that? That would be an active data strategy, if you like.
No, really interesting stuff. John, you wanted to have a comment to this as well?
Just to add to that, I think, because it's the thing I'm picking up and noticing, I think it also drives manufacturers to understand what people do with their data. I think manufacturers know what people do with their products. They'll go in a building and sort of look at them and they'll know what happens to them. But I don't think they know all that much about what happens to the data they provide. And that's why I end up getting involved in lots of conversations about why are they asking for this? What do they want it for? You know?
Yeah.
And often they don't need it, but you know, the customer, but sometimes they do.
Yeah, no, very true. Richard, data strategies, is this something you also get involved with in sort of helping customers to understand or develop?
Not personally, no.
Right.
I don't think it's something I can particularly contribute more over what's already been said. I think it perhaps just perceptions of what is a data strategy probably differs wildly in the scale of your organisation in which you're working.
Okay then, right, well, that was our final question. So thank you very much for everybody that took part